Some terrible news for Donald Trump on the domestic and international front on Thursday. We learned that officially the U.S. housing market has reached its most unaffordable level in history as Trump promised to make housing more affordable. He's done the exact opposite. Also, Donald Trump was supposed to impose sanctions on Russia and supposed to make a big announcement about giving long-range missiles to Ukraine. But now we see that Donald Trump is spending the morning speaking to Vladimir Putin. He goes, "The conversation is ongoing and a lengthy one. I will report the contents, as will President Putin, at its conclusion. Thank you for your attention to this matter." We must listen to Putin reporting the contents. Yes, America first. This as the MAGA Republican Congress members have been meeting today in this past week with the ambassador from Russia, who is providing the MAGA Republicans with what Russia claims to be the true JFK files. And MAGA can't make this stuff up. But then the MAGA Republican Congress members are saying they believe Putin and the Kremlin, and they are thankful for it. And they are planning future meetings with Russia's sovereign wealth fund delegations to discuss trade. That's what MAGA.
The government is in a shutdown. Federal workers aren't getting paid. Families are wondering how to afford groceries. And while America is literally at a standstill, Trump is planning a missile demonstration off of a coast of California. Not for defense, not for disaster response, for show. He's calling it a military review, but it just happens to be scheduled the exact same weekend as the No Kings protests. Do you think that's a coincidence? Or maybe that's a message? A live fire display and Navy warships rolling out while people are protesting. Authoritarianism. Literally, the protest says no kings, so. I think that's a psychological warfare, a hybrid warfare. Intimidation disguised as something else. A reminder of who holds the weapons while the rest of the country can't even get a paycheck. Is this governance? Or maybe a theater, a political theater? A bankrupt empire putting on a fireworks show with a real missiles. The government may be closed, but the propaganda machine seems to be wide open. But what do you think?
Marjorie Taylor Greene just went off on Donald Trump as she is getting tired of him not being America first. Now, as you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been attacking Republicans lately, but she's been a little reserved when going after Donald Trump. But now the gloves are coming off, as she is done after the $40 billion to Argentina. She said, quote, "Americans are getting decimated with high cost of living and skyrocketing insurance costs. Many of them have zero savings and maxing out credit cards. Tell me how it's America first to bail out a foreign country with 20 or 40 billion taxpayer dollars," unquote. That is nice of her to say, nice of her to point out that Donald Trump is not being America first while Americans are hurting. But once again, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene being all talk and no action. Why is she not in Congress, urging Mike Johnson to get Congress back in session and work out a deal with the Democrats that does put America first? Why is she not in Congress, urging a farm bill to be passed to put her district first? This is all talk from Marjorie Taylor Greene and no action.
If you've been trying to avoid reading what the Supreme Court might do to the last key component in the Voting Rights Act, I wouldn't blame you because they break everything they touch. Instead, let me summarize. So a group of white voters sued the state because the state has 2 minority-majority districts. And those white voters feel that they were discriminated against because the state considered race when drawing those district lines. So they sued and claimed the district, and really the Voting Rights Act itself, is a violation of the 14th and 15th Amendments. The 14th guaranteeing equal treatment under the law, and the 15th prohibiting the use of race to disqualify someone from voting. Now I know what you're thinking. Yes, it is the most MAGA 2025 thing ever for a group of people who look like me to try to use the Reconstruction Amendment, laws written specifically to address the crimes against humanity committed by the South, make themselves the victims. These people are obviously cut from the same Confederate cloth as our president, because these amendments, they weren't random or arbitrary. They were patches on crimson-soaked holes in the Constitution. But even setting aside historical context, arguments in this case are ridiculous. White voters in Louisiana are obviously not suffering from inequality. Speaker of the House is from Louisiana, and white voters are overrepresented in the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, governor's mansion, the entire judicial branch, the stock market, and tax brackets. In fact, really the only place in society where black people are actually almost well represented is the House of Representatives. And that's because of the Voting Rights Act. Because redistricting experts have already calculated that the House of Representatives could lose 15 black members if the Supreme Court strikes this down. Now, these Republicans in Louisiana, they say that it's all about politics and not about race. But that's obviously bullshit. Because it's actually not hard to win the votes of black people. You just have to put forward leaders and policies that don't actively destroy black people's lives. If it were really about politics, they would just have better policies. Because if they had better policies, there wouldn't be such a high correlation between black voters and Democrats. This lawsuit is about race. Because the Voting Rights Act was about race. Because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were about race. Because the Civil War was about race. These laws are the direct consequences for people, including those living in Louisiana, who chose to fight a war to suppress a race. Even if those consequences continue to be inconvenient for rich white men decades later. Because I hate to break it to you, but it was rich white men who were fighting that war in the first place. But back to today, because we still have to deal with today. Well, it looks like the Supreme Court might split this issue, not cut the Voting Rights Act entirely, but make it harder to sue. It doesn't change the fact that this was never a durable solution. Because the real issue here isn't whether black people can vote. They can and they will. And the kinds of tricks they use to get around those amendments, like poll taxes and literacy tests, are still illegal. The issue is gerrymandering, something that is not protected by the Supreme Court or the Constitution. Congress at any time, any year, can step up and ban it. And in fact, we did try to do that exact thing in 2022, but Republicans filibustered and blocked it. Because if they can't cheat, they can't win. So if you want to support the Constitution, if you want to support marginalized people, if you want to render whatever the Supreme Court rules on this case absolutely useless, vote out every single Republican who ever resisted redistricting reform. And maybe, just maybe, we can put behind us this fight that threatens to tear apart the United States at the seams.
We are now hearing from Russia after Trump and Putin's phone call, and a lot was said here. Let's break it down. This information is coming from the Russian presidential aide, who said that the phone call lasted nearly 2.5 hours, saying it was very meaningful and extremely frank. It says here the two leaders focus heavily on the war in Ukraine. Putin told Trump that Russia holds a strategic initiative, accusing Kyiv of using terrorist tactics, and said that Moscow is forced to respond, which doesn't make any sense, but okay, well, wait a moment here. Trump, meanwhile, pushed for peace repeatedly saying that ending the war could open up what calls an enormous opportunities for cooperation, meaning that if you end this war, we can make a lot of money. But the main part of the conversation was Tomahawk missiles, in which the presidential aide said that Putin warned that any U.S. delivery of Tomahawks to Ukraine wouldn't change the battlefield, but would seriously damage relations between Washington and Moscow. Both sides kept on saying they need to talk further, with a possible meetup in Budapest, Hungary. What does all this mean? It means the Kremlin confirmed that, yes, Trump directly praised peace, raised peace, saying, hey, we need to have some kind of peace, while Putin kind of drew a line on U.S. weapons, saying essentially, you can't give Tomahawks to Ukraine, plus it wouldn't matter, it wouldn't do things. All of this actually means, if you look at the face of this, Russia just confirmed that, yes, giving Tomahawks to Ukraine would actually change things on the battlefield. And all of this is for two things. One, for Russia to stall. They're trying to get the United States not to give these weapons to Ukraine so that they can keep attacking civilians. And two, everything's about money. Because even Trump mentioned money, and they mentioned money. So it looks like they both do want to end this thing so they can both make money. But Trump did bring up Tomahawks, which means he's highly considering it. And we know the Pentagon themselves have a document out there that Trump could sign, which, tomorrow we could see if Trump is actually going to sign it. Now, I will say any peace negotiations with Russia and the United States in Budapest, whether it be Trump and Putin or high-level officials, won't do anything. That's just a stall tactic that the Russians use. But clearly here, from the Russian side, you could see that they're scared of tomahawks, which means the United States should give tomahawks to Ukraine. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. I'll be sure to keep you updated, so please do share my videos and follow me for more.
Well, this is an important cup of tea. A whole lot of y'all have reached out to me today about the news that's spreading that people that receive SNAP benefits will not receive their benefits starting November 1st. SNAP benefits, EBT, that is food stamps. And yes, a letter was sent to states to tell them to withhold releasing funds to recipients, dear. And in that letter, they were talking about the shutdown. But that's not what's going on. No, baby, I've got the entire cup of tea. So what you may not know is that back in May, the current regime sent letters all across the US of A to the SNAP departments, to the EBT departments, requesting data on EBT recipients, those who receive food stamp benefits, going all the way back, this is important, all the way back to 2020. Now, what was going on in the United States in 2020? The flu-pocalypse. And because of the flu-pocalypse, people in the United States were receiving SNAP benefits that had never received SNAP benefits before under emergency SNAP benefits. Millions of Americans who had never received SNAP benefits before were receiving them because we were in a national emergency because of the flu-pocalypse. Just like people who had never before qualified for unemployment because they were 1099 employees were receiving unemployment benefits because we were in a crisis here. Okay. So it's safe to say that a whole lot of the people who started freshly and newly receiving benefits in 2020 are no longer receiving those benefits anymore because that emergency is over. Right? Right. Now, blue states refute 27 states turned over that data. Red states, they turned over that data to the federal government about who in their state receives these SNAP benefits. And this isn't regular data. This is all your personal information. You see, we already give data to the federal government about SNAP benefits, not the names of the people who receive it or their home addresses or their social security numbers or all that other stuff that you put on those applications. Just data about how many people are receiving the benefits and what the amounts are. That's normal. But asking for all this personal data is not normal. And blue states came out to say, nope, we're not sending you this data because this is just another play by this regime to collect data on Americans for surveillance for immigration operations. And they refused to send in that private data to the current regime. And it pissed off the current regime, dear. It did. It pissed them off because legally, these states don't have to turn over that data. They don't have to. Nope, they don't have to. And it's pissed off the current administration. So in a play to try to force Democratic states to hand over your private information, they're threatening to withhold benefits. And it's an empty threat because the federal government doesn't have the authority to come into your state and force EBT to withhold your benefits. However, alarm bells should be going off for you today if you are living in a red state, because these 27 red states complied right away in May and handed over that data to the regime. So there's no reason to believe that those red states wouldn't once again comply with the administration and withhold those benefits. Now, if you live in a red state, your red state actually has the right to deny this request legally and still issue you your EBT benefits, dear. They don't have the right to stop it in any kind of way. We're going to have to see how this plays out today. But it's making the current regime look very, very guilty, honey. That they're just wanting to collect data, just like blue states said, for their little immigration and surveillance plays. And imagine the amount of data on Americans they would receive through EBT going all the way back to 2020. They will receive data and personal private information on American citizens who no longer even receive these benefits, dear. It would be a huge data haul, wouldn't it? But either way, from everything that I can find today, they legally cannot stop you from receiving your benefits. They can't claim it's a shutdown, because that wouldn't cause you to not receive your benefits, dear. They can't claim anything, really, at all, as a legal reason to keep people from receiving their benefits. They can't say that it's, they're trying to sort out fraud and waste either. That's not an excuse for withholding funds from people who are not participating in fraud and waste, dear. Okay, so I hope that helps you out a little bit today if you're in fear in some kind of way. I still think you should keep your eye on this if you're living in a red state to see if they're going to comply. And this is going to affect you too, MAGA. If your red state decides to comply full on with the current regime, you're not going to get your benefits, baby. Because, whether you want to believe this or not, Red Hat, with your food stamps and all of that, this was never about sorting out fraud and waste, honey. This was about changing the federal government to no longer support the people who support the federal government. This was about making sure that your taxpayer money never, ever went to you, honey. But yes, that's the tea right there. They've been trying to do this since May of this year. They want the data on Americans going all the way back to 2020, which would include millions of Americans who no longer even receive these benefits. They don't need your personal information to track the data of fraud and waste and abuse within the SNAP programs. They don't need your personal data for that. They already have enough data to see if there's any fraud or waste and abuse. All of this, all of it is bullshit. Every bit of it is bullshit. Okay. All right. I hope that helps.
I guess all it took was a couple of years and a new president to change some minds on the Supreme Court about how to use race when drawing congressional district maps. The conservative supermajority seems now open to limiting how race can be used, which in turn could impact the power of your vote and who will represent you. And this ruling will ultimately have major implications for all future elections. So today, the justices heard oral arguments for about 2.5 hours in a case out of Louisiana. So this whole case centers around the state's congressional district map. And as we talk about all the time on my channel, the founding fathers believed that those district maps should be drawn fairly based on population and should be proportional. Well, in 2022, a federal judge ruled the way Louisiana lawmakers drew their congressional map violated Section 2 of the landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act because those lawmakers racially gerrymandered the map to eliminate a black voting district. Instead of 2, they drew a new map with just 1 district, which then diluted the power of the black voters who actually lived in that part of Louisiana. Now, because of that judge's decision, Louisiana lawmakers had to go back to the drawing board and redraw that congressional map. And so they added that second black district back. But then another group calling themselves non-African American voters sued, saying that new map with those 2 black districts now violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. The state of Louisiana and the Trump administration agreed, and they joined the case. Well, in court today, the state of Louisiana and the Trump administration argued to the justices that race played way too big of a role in that decision to add back that second black district. The state of Louisiana argued that Louisiana has changed over the years, and the need to protect minorities and their voting power through Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act isn't necessary like it was in the 1960s or 80s or even in the early 2000s. The Trump administration argued that, well, states should be allowed to factor race into their redistricting decisions, but only if race-neutral factors are considered first. So what's a race-neutral factor? I'm not kidding. The Trump administration said gerrymandering a map just to protect an incumbent lawmaker is an example of a race-neutral factor that should be considered before the actual race of the people who live in that area. The lawyer defending Louisiana's black voters said, All of that is nonsense. She said Louisiana may have changed a little bit over the years, but not enough to strip out Section 2 protections of the Voting Rights Act. She argued the state is actively engaging in a practice called packing and cracking, which in this case means packing all of Louisiana's black voters into just one district so they would, in theory, only be able to elect one representative instead of the number that would be proportional to their population size in the state. And cracking the black voters in this context means drawing weird congressional map lines in an effort to spread those black voters out into several districts in an effort to dilute their voting power.
6 appellate judges affirmed findings that Louisiana, in the face of extreme racially polarized voting, packed and cracked black voters, and it rejected 7 non-dilutive maps in favor of one that would give its 58% declining white electorate entrenched control over 83% of the congressional districts.
Now, here's where things get interesting. Before I tell you about how the justices reacted to all of these arguments today, I want to remind you of an almost identical case this very same Supreme Court ruled on in 2023, just like 2 years ago. In Allen v. Milligan, the justices ruled 5-4 that lawmakers in Alabama drew a gerrymandered district map that absolutely diluted the black vote by eliminating one of their districts. And the justices found that Alabama definitely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The 3 liberal justices signed on to that majority ruling, along with conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh and Chief Justice John Roberts, who actually wrote the majority opinion. But today, both Roberts and Kavanaugh seem to have a change of heart and mind about allowing race as a factor when considering drawing district maps. Kavanaugh seemed to sympathize with the state of Louisiana and suggested that it may be time for race factors to just go away.
This court's cases in a variety of contexts have said that race-based remedies are permissible for a period of time, sometimes for a long period of time, decades in some cases, but that they should not be indefinite and should have an endpoint.
Now, if the justices rule that race-based factors should be limited when drawing district maps, you can expect that state lawmakers across the country will absolutely gerrymander the crap out of their maps to protect or enhance their majorities or their incumbents.
Americans, you need to know that there is a tracker and a database of all of Donald Trump's authoritarian actions since he came to power in this second term, January 2025. This database is being maintained by a notable British academic, Professor Christina Pagel, and her team, and essentially every time Donald Trump engages in a new authoritarian action, an undemocratic action, something that undermines the rule of law, suppresses dissent, whatever, they log it, they track it, they do charts and data on it, the lot. So they categorize all of these actions into 5 main categories. The first is undermining democracy and the rule of law. The second is suppressing dissent. The third is undermining civil rights and engaging in corruption. The fourth is attacks on science and academia. And the fifth is the aggressive foreign policy, the destabilizing foreign policy. So those are the 5 categories, and they log them as they come in. And then they chart them out month by month. And what you can see from that is that the rate of Trump's authoritarian actions is accelerating. It has increased every month. And if you look at the breakdown of categories, you can see the phase that Donald Trump is now moving into is a lot of suppression of dissent. So this is a fantastically useful resource, particularly because the mainstream media, the Republicans who care, and the Democrats are all completely incapable of dealing with this barrage of authoritarian action that's coming along. But that's part of the plan. As Steve Bannon says, flood the zone. You just flood the zone with these aggressive actions. But the right answer to flood the zone is actually map the flood, because then you're not dancing from topic to topic and not knowing which to juggle now or which to keep on at. But rather, you can say, look, each new thing fits into a pattern. We're mapping the pattern. Here is the authoritative reference for the pattern. This is your resource. So this is a fantastic resource that I want everyone to be aware of. And you can go and look it up yourself. at trumpactiontracker.info. I will put that link in here as well in the comments. But essentially, in a time when mainstream media let us down, it is so important that we support all of these emergent citizen and expert capacities that can bubble up so that we can actually take the battle that way. So please do go and have a look at that, share it, support, do what you can. It's fascinating. Thank you.